Sam Seder, Emma Vigeland, Majority Report, joining us now. Always a pleasure. Jeet here, National Affairs Correspondent for The Nation magazine. Jeet, two things. One, people are asking about the Working Families Party. As you know, today is the last day to switch your party affiliation if you want to vote in the Democratic primary. We were just talking about Eric Adams. People can be a member. I vote for the WFP on the party line and all that, but I am registered as a Democrat. I've had people at the WFP tell me register as a Democrat so you can vote in the primary.
Exactly.
And that's it. So I just want to clarify that.
Right.
The other thing, and Jeet just told us this, that I mentioned the Saturday Night Massacre.
Here,
we just read the letter from Gatton, from Hagen Scotton, sorry.
Yeah.
And Hagen Scotton, one of the 5 U.S. attorneys who he wasn't asked, but he preemptively refused to file the motion to dismiss charges against Eric Adams. Harry Littman says he's got a strong rumor with credible sourcing, and other people have had similar sourcing. The DOJ has put all of the public integrity line attorneys in a room. This is all the people in this division in the Southern District of New York office. They're all in a room, and they just going around going like, you have an hour. One of you guys have to decide who is going to sign this motion to dismiss the charges against Eric Adams. And if nobody does, you'll all be fired.
Yeah,
this
is happening right now as we're speaking. You mentioned the Saturday Night Massacre. The thing is, when you're doing this sort of purge or trying to force the DOJ to do something, you would always need to, the technical term is find the Bork. The Bork is the figure who has no ethics and who will sign off on something that everyone else will resign rather than sign off on. That's what happened with Nixon. People were resigning left, right, and center, and then they got to Bork, and Bork said, "Oh, I'll sign that."
And this is Robert Bork, who ultimately got rewarded with a nomination to the Supreme Court and ended up getting shot down. He's also the same Robert Bork who was at the University of Chicago, who came up under the Reagan administration with essentially an alteration of our antitrust law in this country that essentially destroyed antitrust for 40 years, really until the Biden administration.
Well, it's a funny thing because University of Chicago economics was strongly antitrust until somehow they got some money and suddenly switched overnight, and Bork became the argument, well, trust law is not good. But having said that, right now they're like looking for the Bork. The search for the Bork is on, and this is what it's going to hinge on. If they can find someone who can sign off on this, and they might not be able to, and then you're going to have a real purge. You're already having a purge. This is like a much more severe than the Saturday Night Massacre. It is like
it's the Valentine's Day Massacre.
Yeah, it's Valentine's Day Massacre. Yeah, happy Valentine's Day, guys. You're always being my heart.
What's also,
don't do the Elon salute.
I mean, I wonder what happens in that room is really important, because I wonder how much this is going to be a signal to other U.S. attorneys across the country. I mean, you and I both remember the purging of U.S. attorneys in 2005 and lead up to 2004, where Karl Rove wanted there to be more cases of voter fraud. And you had U.S. attorneys across the country going like, I can't come up with any. Chris Christie delivered some stuff, but there were others that couldn't come up with any, and they were fired by the administration in what people thought was a violation of the Hatch Act. That sounds really quaint now in some respects, but the implications of these are Trumpies. These are not like, these are all like Federalist Society, clerking for Scalia and Gatton, apparently.
Chief
Hagen
John
Scotton,
Roberts.
John Roberts. I mean, these are.
Well, this is where like the Trump stuff has always hit the fan, because like if you are a lawyer, it doesn't matter if you're Federalist Society or if you're the ACLU, whatever, you actually like have signed on to certain oaths, and you have signed on, and your whole career and your whole future hinges on like you not doing being caught in situations where you're doing something unethical. And it's always been the case that that sort of Trumpist enterprise has sort of fallen into real problems when you have try to get lawyers to execute things that are unlawful. And I mean, I'm not a big fan of using the law as an instrument of like politics, but it is the case that where we've seen like people around Trump who have been punished, like Giuliani, it's always because like actually you have to actually follow the law. There are actually rules in this world.
Well, but this isn't what I'm talking about is as a political matter.
Yeah.
Watching attorneys, U.S. attorneys say, I'm not going to do this. I wonder what kind of pressure it puts on other U.S. attorneys around the government to say, hey, wait a second. This is embarrassing. And also, I mean, this is embarrassing. I mean, there's an interesting dynamic right now because particularly with these types of people.
It actually like gets at the heart of like, what you want in a government. Like, do you just want like a Republican government or you want a government that's totally subservient to Trump? And, like there's a lot of regular Republicans that are just on board for like, we have a Republican president, we'll serve him. And this is going to be the sort of like crisis point. And I think it's actually like the Democrats would be insane not to make a huge stink about this, because this is actually like a real fissure point within the Republican coalition as to like what is actually you're going to actually do here. I think that like to actually like make the case that like if they buckle down under now, then like the DOJ across the country is going to be subservient to Trump. That's a big point.
But they may, right? Because if the Democratic Party likes anything, they like lawyers, right? And, I there is a lot of outrage in the legal community. I mean, specifically targeting the Southern District of New York and what that represents in the legal field. That is it's a shot across the bow and not in a good way.
Well, you guys might know this better than me, but what's the like New York State politics situation like? Because I'm hearing a lot of people crying for the governor to kind of intervene.
Well, this is, in New York State now, Delgado, who is lieutenant governor, who was picked by Hochul when Hochul had to replace the disgraced Andrew Cuomo, disgraced and the disgrace that is Andrew Cuomo. And he came out and said Adams should resign, before Hochul. And now Hochul apparently is.
I could see him primarying her.
Yes, taking it under advisement as to whether she will remove him, because while he's still under indictment, my understanding is she could. Now, she could also be sort of like trying to bide time, because once the indictment goes away, I don't know if she has the ability to do that.
Right. And I don't know why she would want to keep him unless it's just like, I don't know, general weakness, but it would be good for her politically if she were to remove him.
Oh, I think it's risky. And I think anything that speaks of a risk, and also and any risk that it could actually be helpful to her. She also is not very good in the like.
She's also like wants to play ball with Trump because Trump's getting involved in backing up Phil Murphy in New Jersey, who's trying to kill congestion pricing, which has already gone into effect and is supposed to statutorily fund our subway repairs and all of these like important new constructions. So I think that's part of it, right?
Yeah, I guess. I just don't know how he rescinds congestion pricing, but maybe what he does is says, like, I'm not giving you highway funds.
Right.
Unless you, something like that. I mean, we saw Reagan do that with the drinking age 40 years ago.
But can we just step back? Because, it seems to me like just watching this unfold, like, especially on Fox News, where, like, Adams was on with, like, one of Trump's DOJ person. And, this is openly corrupt as anything I've ever seen, where the guy was basically saying, like,
if he doesn't do his job, I'm coming back there and telling him we could arrest you again.
Yeah, so basically using the DOJ to, like, enforce a political will on the mayor of New York. Now, I have to think, like, I know congestion prices and federal funds or whatever, but I have to think if you're the governor of New York, like, to watch, like, the president of the United States illegitimately use the political leverage to, like, on television, like not in secret, like on television, to to strong arm the mayor of New York. Like,
I need some time to think about it, Chief. I need some time to think about it.
What did you get some political points for standing up to that? For saying we're New York City, we're New York State. We don't let Washington push us around.
They're so terrified. It's unbelievable. And
so
also
leverage you can gain from that.
And the other thing to consider is that not only is there so much leverage there, it's like hanging out there. And let's also be clear. Adams offered the bribe to the government. And then they said yes. And then they dismissed without prejudice so that they could extort him going forward. This is a bribery extortion case, like on both ends. It's pretty impressive. Were Kathy Hochul to make an issue of this, you suddenly can tie that into the 21st district, where Stefanik's race is up. And now they have put her nomination confirmation on ice because they're afraid they're not going to have the votes to pass whatever budget deals that they're doing. So we may not have a representative to the UN for a while.
Right.
But eventually her election's going to come up. And if Donald Trump is painted as trying to bribe and extort New York State, this doesn't even have to be anything other than hey, New York pride, whatever it is.
Where's
New
your
York's
strong?
New York's the Istanbul of America, right?
Where's your sense of you have to stand up for where you are, just as a have some sense of dignity, people. Just have some sense of self-worth. Beyond politics.
It's this is basically almost like sports, right? I mean, it's basically like sports. How could you do this?
Yeah.
We're the home of the Yankees and the Mets. We don't allow this.
But I mean, in a sense, they're allowing Trump to be the New Yorker. He's the guy who's actually, I'm the tough guy. I'm gonna railroad everybody and go over them. And they're positioning themselves as weak defenders of the home county and who just buckle under. So just on a basic political level, I hate to tell these guys, they're professionals. Maybe they know what they're doing, but this seems totally idiotic. This is
you're absolutely. I mean, you're absolutely right. And I'm I want to just sort of wait for another 5 or 10 minutes before we get to how the Democrats are not capitalizing on this stuff because we have more to catalog. But this is honestly one of the most. I mean, I was saying earlier, if this had been Danielle Sassoon in her letter says that Beauvais, the acting attorney general before Bondi got in there, was in a meeting with all of them and specifically said no notes. And then at the end of the meeting was I want to collect all your notes and collected all the notes. Had this been a phone call where the audio had leaked, it feels like it would be a much bigger scandal. But it's almost like and this came up during the last Trump administration. The U.S. body politic, the media, the Democratic Party certainly, does not have the capacity to process this type of crime, essentially, when it's done without any shame. Our minds think that if you do something this wrong, you're going to try and hide it, not write it out in a letter to be made public. And then people are just well, how bad could it be?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it's totally bad. I in terms of the politics, I would want to emphasize something, which is I do take the point that the Democratic leadership make, that you have to pick your fights. You can't be reacting to everything. You have to be strategic. But I have to say, to have the Department of Justice in crisis like this and openly going on television using blackmail against the mayor of New York City, if that's not a crisis, if that's not a political fight that you pick, then what fight will you pick?
Well, that's the thing, is that it's very difficult to figure out what it is that they're waiting for. But let's go through what we've seen. From your perspective, if you can't fight every battle, what have been the battles? What have been the most egregious things over the past mean, it's been almost 3 weeks since he's been elected, for almost 4 weeks. What are the most egregious things? Like, what are the ones that deserve the most attention?
Yeah, I mean the Musk stuff definitely, like just the sort of basically the coup of the administrative state and all that stuff is like illegal. And like have been doing some stuff, especially like the sort of like the courts level. To me, like that is core. The other stuff, like one can get outraged that Trump says like many vile things, right? But he doesn't necessarily act on them. Like I'm as opposed as can be to ethnic cleansing in Gaza, but like does actually Trump have or taking over Canada, right? But like I don't necessarily see like these are things that are going to happen immediately. I don't see the mechanism for that. So we actually have to look at like what they're actually doing. And for me, the big fight is first of all this Adams thing, but beyond that, the Elon Musk thing. Those are where you have to be fighting.
Right. It just brought, but now what part of the Elon Musk thing? I mean, honestly, that is the difficult part because it's hard in some ways to parse this stuff out. I know somebody who works in cancer research at a prominent New York hospital. They got a letter. It supposedly frozen the rescinding of these NIH grants, but he said they just lost 40% of their funding.
Yeah.
I got a IMer right here, who writes in, National Labor Relations Board attorney here, acting general counsel just rescinded a bunch of memos allowing student athletes to organize, outlawing non-competes, expanding National Labor Relations Board remedial powers, banning captive audience meetings, etc. He's not even a Trump guy. He's just a regular Republican. Like, what Musk is doing, aside from, is it, when you say what Musk is doing, are we talking about the unconstitutionality of it? Or are we talking about the implications of each agency, how Americans are going to feel it?
Okay. I mean, I think you can make a distinction between the sort of big picture overview of like, what is the original sin here? And then how it affects people. Because I think the second part is very relevant for how you organize. But the first part, I mean, I think you have to immediately say that this whole enterprise is totally illegitimate. There's no basis in the Constitution for like a private citizen who is part of an agency that is just created by executive order to go in and take over the federal government the way Musk has been doing. It's totally illegitimate, and it's also fraught with corruption because he's the world's richest man and he's getting access to all sorts of valuable things. Just like data is money, data is power. He's going to be able to data mine the government. That's all totally illegitimate, and I think that should be the case. That what we have here is a plutocratic takeover of the government. What Bernie talks about, oligarchy. This is the oligarchy right here. That's the main big picture political item. Now, having said that, once you make that argument, then to get people where it hurts, like mentioned, yeah, they're getting rid of cancer funding. They're hurting like all the agencies that people rely on. So you have to have a two-front thing. Keep the big picture in mind, but then also like actually specifically lay out all these outrages, and you can organize on a local level for that because there's hospitals all across the country that are being affected. That's why I sort of conceptualize this.
Okay, so let's just take the broader argument, right? Mm-hmm. How do you communicate that? I mean, as opposed to just saying it, right? Like, because I get it. I mean, there's a lot of people who ran around with their hair on fire. I was one of them. And frankly, I think it was justified during the first Trump administration.
And that's actually worked. We actually prevented a lot of bad things happening in Trump.
The resistance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Resistance. Yeah. But in any case, yeah.
Okay. But when you have something this sort of fundamental, there is, Donald Trump cutting, and the Republicans voting to cut, the Republicans could have voted away the Affordable Care Act, and they could have gotten rid of health insurance for tens of millions of Americans. They could have, tens upon tens upon tens of millions of Americans. When you think about Medicaid, they could have rolled back all the patient protections that we have in the ACA, rescission and, caps and stuff like that. But that would not have been a breach of the Constitution. You would have immediately moved to that sort of second level thing of like, here is this kid who doesn't have health insurance anymore. Here is this 55-year-old who doesn't have health insurance anymore, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But in this instance, it is extra constitutional what he's doing.
Yeah.
Unconstitutional? What do the Democrats do to communicate that? Like what? It's one thing to go up and go like, people are getting aroused. The Baileys have called me. They're aroused. What are we gonna do here? Or what do you do to communicate that they're breaking the Constitution here? Do you not vote for anything? Do you say like, we're not going inside these chambers. We're not going to do any of this stuff.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that is a sort of indivisible type argument that you actually use all the levers that you have to just gum up the work and shut down the government. But to do that, you have to come to the conclusion first that, yes, this is a constitutional threat. This is a sort of existential threat to American democracy. And then you have to have a leadership that is committed to going all out and doing that. And then they absolutely have the ability to do that. It would not stop anything so much as slow things down like a great deal and then raise the urgency of the issue.
But that's the point. It would communicate to the American public something's really wrong here.
And you can tie it into the billionaire stuff. I mean, like you mentioned, just Elon Musk, this is going under the radar, but he is trying to turn Twitter into a bank, X, right?
Yes.
Because that's always been his dream with PayPal. And he's obsessed with payments. So he's like rifling around in the treasury. But Twitter announced it struck a deal with Visa to soon offer mobile payments as a service online. That is from 2 days ago, this article mentioning that. He's stealing. The billionaires are stealing from you because he wants to make a bank. I mean, that's pretty simple in terms of how you can communicate that.
Sure, and even like what's happening today, like J.D. Vance is in Europe talking to European diplomats, and a big part of his speech is you guys got to give Musk what he wants. So basically, the Vice President of the United States has made American foreign policy subservient to this billionaire who also happens to be put in charge of the American government.
He was sitting next to Modi like he was the goddamn head of state yesterday talking to him.
Yeah. Now, in terms of the communication, like, I do know, I got to give credit. They did set up a rapid response team chaired by Rosie DeLauro, who's actually quite admirable, 81 years old, and Jerry Connolly, 74, has, I think, a pretty severe case of cancer.
But he's the most spry. He's the most spry of cancer patients on the Hill.
So I would say that, like, if you're having communicating your urgency, having a rapid response team that is it almost entirely consists of people that are senior citizens is not getting the message across. I mean, at a very basic level, like, and this is not going to happen, right? But like, I actually think like Schumer and Jeffries have to resign. Like they're clearly not in a mode to do that. And you have to put people in charge as the public face of the party who are fighters and who will know how to go on TV, know how to explain urgency, and who are committed to like a maximum resistance program. Like someone like AOC in the House or Bernie. Now they're not going to do that, but I mean, we could actually, for our part, like, because we're not the party, we can lay out like, this is what you have to do. This is like our position. This is like, if you're serious about this, if you're taking this stuff seriously, and once you have a leadership that is committed to fighting, then they can make a very simple proposition, which is we're going to have midterms coming up. Our proposition to the American people is what's happening now is an attack on the Constitution, attack on American democracy, and its open plutocracy. And if you give us a House and Senate, we will investigate the hell out of these guys and make them pay for what they're doing. Now, you make that your argument going forward. That's what they would do, I think, if they took this stuff as seriously as they should. Now, it's pretty clear from everything that Schumer and Jeffries have said that they do not take this stuff as seriously as you and I do, and that might be worth talking about.
Yeah, I mean, let's have that talk. They don't seem to take it seriously, and before they can get to, we will, if you give us the House and the Senate, we'll investigate the hell out of this. They need to be out there communicating there's a problem.
Yes,
and
yes.
if they're sitting there saying, people are getting aroused,
right.
or we're getting, like, we will win. Or if,
Jeffrey says you don't swing at every pitch. Well, okay, but your swing is really weak. Like, you probably shouldn't be up at bat.
Or you got to swing at a pitch. And here is Conley, on his call. This is his big call where he's talking about how we made the Republicans scramble, and he doesn't even have a freaking microphone. I mean, give me a break.
That's the thing, that whole Musk thing. Like, they held a meeting to like vote on like
a subpoena.
A subpoena, but they knew they didn't have the vote, and Connolly was thinking that some Republicans would vote for him, like as if he doesn't know the Republican Party for the last 30 years. And he also ended up saying, well, we got what we wanted, which is that you lost. So what you wanted, what your goal was to lose.
It's not even that, because look, they're going to lose. He said, what we got, what we wanted. We made them scramble. And it's like, dude, they just don't understand you are not going to win. They are not going to win any fight. But the whole point is they need to show the American public why they're fighting. In the loss, and it will be loss after loss after loss, but within each loss, they need to communicate to the American public, this is not the Democratic Party's loss. It is America's loss. It is not just our loss. We are fighting for you. It is your loss. You have lost. Every time we are not empowered to do anything, we are all losing. They are not communicating that, and they don't even seem to understand that's what they got to be doing.
No, that's absolutely right. And I want to think through a little bit like why they think this, because I think there's some good reporting. And a lot of this is coming from the donor class. And basically, the really big donors have told Schumer and Jeffries, like this is not an emergency. What is the stuff Trump is doing is going to be gummed up by the courts. And so you just let things run its course. You basically, Schumer's theory is you just let like Trump screw up, and then things will fall on your lap. And now I think that there's a couple of problems with that theory, but that is a theory. And also the donors are saying, like, ignore the base. I know you're getting a lot of calls from your constituents saying, like, do
something.
Why the hell aren't you doing anything?
Yeah.
But just ignore those people, because we've done the analysis. This stuff is bad, but it's survivable, and more importantly, we have a mechanism in place, which is the courts. I think that is the actual thinking that's going on here. Now, I think it's worth unpacking. I mean, I want to give them credit in terms of like putting their analysis in the best case possible, and say, like, I actually do think that like trusting the courts is not totally false. There is, I think Trump has a very bad record in the courts. I think he has very bad lawyers. I think that there are fights that they are winning and could win in the future. It's not totally like the rule of law is actually a thing that exists to some degree, even if it's battered. So it's not totally wrong. But I also think that just relying on the courts is bad politics because it demobilizes people. It basically says, like, it's like Q, like, trust the plan, trust the judges. It gives people no reason to like pay attention to politics, to engage with politics, and to go in and protest and to be active members of your party. And beyond that, like, if they lose in the courts, but you don't have politicians that can communicate what these losses mean, can communicate the fact that the courts have shown that Trump has violated the Constitution, and this is a real illegitimate power grab. Unless you can articulate that idea, then the court decisions, they have consequences, but they don't have political consequences.
Exactly.
You have to be in the realm of politics. You can't just have the courts and no politics. The politics is, and you actually need the politics to like preserve the courts. You need the politics to give all these lawyers who like they're going to try to fire like some courage in some sense that like we're standing up for something and that people will respect us and that there's a bigger fight out there. So I just think like their whole analysis that like let's rely on the courts and I don't think that works.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's completely contrary to what their role. I mean, they're out there saying we have no power. Literally, he's saying we have no leverage. Okay, well then, how about doing some politics?
I mean, the Axios report that we have no leverage, and that we're mad and we're angry, and the people we're mad at are
I should tell you,
voters.
No, on Wednesday, and I just want to make this clear. On Wednesday, I called Richie Torres's office, both in the Bronx and in D.C. Nobody answered. I left a voicemail apologizing to him for because he really resents that we feel like they're not doing anything. He rejects and resents it, and we just want to apologize for upsetting him because I know, that this time of year is a good time of year to take a vacation. Maybe you want to go, I know my son's got vacation next week, and everybody wants to go and maybe get a little bit of sun or something like that. And we're really interfering with his potential, his trip to the Bahamas.
His R&R.
Or wherever was he going to go? Yeah. Give me your sense of like if you were one of the good billionaires. I don't think that these things exist. But let's say that one of the good billionaires came to you, or any billionaire, or let's just say, actually, even better, we were able to pass one law that was we're going to appropriate billionaires' money. And as part of this law, Jeet here is in charge of building the infrastructure to deal with what's going on right now. If the Democrats' role, the elected Democrats' role, would be to communicate to the American public what's going on with this attack on the administrative state is unconstitutional, first level. Second level, and here's how it's hurting individuals around the country. And to their credit, I've heard it floated. I don't know if they're going to do it. I've heard the floating of like creating a shadow government in some way. So like essentially a shadow head of the CDC, so that in the event that bird flu ends up continuing to become a greater problem, there's somebody every day who's putting out a report, saying, hey, I've collected all this information. The CDC is not allowed to release it. And we've been able to, and maybe there's a shadow, whatever. Where would the different players play? In other words, like if that's the role for the Democrats, where are the different groups? We're going to be talking to the ED of Move On in a minute. Where do these different groups, where should they function?
Okay. I think that their main function right now is actually like putting pressure on the Democratic Party to do some of this stuff, which they're not doing. But like, if you can get to a position where like the Democrats are in an active opposition, then I think the main role is one of sort of like communication, and to realize that the information environment is very hostile, and that basically one of the things that Musk is doing is using Twitter to spread like lies and propaganda and to defame civil servants. And you actually need like an alternative communication network to debunk that. Now, I'm not positive that I think all his lies are working. Like he keeps saying he's found all this fraud, and I think the media has actually done a pretty good job of saying that like they've actually found no fraud. But if you had like an active political movement that's out there keeping people engaged and informed about what is going on, that has an infrastructure in place, and that is like strongly like partisan and has a sense of, which side are you on? Who's your friend? Who's your enemy? And can define Musk in particular as the enemy, as the embodiment of this billionaire class that has like basically taken over the government. I think that would be the most effective use for these outside groups to actually like mobilize people. Now,
yes.
I think currently the Democratic Party does not want their voters mobilized. Like they just want people to show up and vote in special elections and midterms. But actually, I think that if we can get the Democratic Party in opposition, then the secondary role is to just explain to people what's going on, because there's a lot of stuff going on, and there's a lot of different people that care about things. Like there'd be parents that care about the vaccination stuff. There'd be obviously like medical patients that care about like all the stuff they're doing to the healthcare system. Obviously, elderly people about Medicare and Social Security. So you actually need to which is something they've resisted doing, but like actually create an infrastructure for communication, an alternative media structure that actually doesn't just say give us money, we're fighting Donald Trump, send us $5, but is actually communicating with people what the crisis is.
Well said.
Well said. All this news just keeps pouring in. The AP is reporting that HHS is preparing to fire 5,000 employees this afternoon. So,
yeah. I do actually think just looking at all the people that are being fired, and these are people in very critical stuff, in terms of air traffic controller, people involved with nuclear power. I honestly feel like we're headed for a disaster of some sort, but you can't be like Chuck Schumer and just say a disaster will happen and then people will realize Trump is bad and come to us. You actually you need to have people who are going to explain what is the disaster when the disaster happens. And I'm pretty sure a disaster is heading our way. You need to actually be able to explain what happened.
We just had a plane crash that killed nearly 60 people. Have the Democrats been bringing that up at all after he threw the federal government into chaos? I don't use that politically. That's a disaster.
Yeah.
I mean, planes are falling out of the sky. We're all mad. I mean, I'm. It's just frustrating. Yeah,
I will put it. I mean, the Trump offers a good counterpoint to this, because when Biden was in power, anything bad that happened, East Palestine or whatever, they were out there. They were saying well, why isn't Pete Buttigieg doing something about the trains? Do we see anything comparable to that? Someone actually looking at what's going around and making them into the political arguments that they actually are.
No, they do the Laken Riley Act. They'll pick a white girl who was killed by somebody who was an immigrant, and they'll make a whole thing out of it. Where are the Democrats introducing legislation named Bill Johnson, who died last year because he wasn't able to get health care? That's what they need to be doing. Politicizing. It doesn't matter if they think it's performative or it's beneath them. Do politics. Act like you're resisting, even if you don't have the mechanisms to do it. That's the lesson here. So,
Gee, sort of a pleasure.
Well, yeah,
in its own special way. Always a pleasure. Great to talk to you. We will talk to you soon. Yeah. As always, we will link to your latest piece in The Nation magazine, and to people go back and read what you've been saying for months and months and months. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Oh, it was great to be on. And as I said, happy Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
Yes, you too.
Sorry, we didn't mean to yell at you. We're yelling with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye, guys.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.